Hi, Chris. Really good to have you on board.
Hello,
So you
Nick.
come from B Digital?
I am, yes, delighted to be here and chatting to you guys at last. Yeah, be digital, yes. I've always worked in, well, in education, not in the school side, but on the product side, the client side. Yeah, no, it was interesting to think. I knew you'd probably ask me, how did you end up where you ended up?
Absolutely.
And there's always everyone's got a story, right? So right here, right now, I'm the strategic director for B Digital Marketing. We're a specialist sector marketing agency that deals with companies that sell and market products to schools all around the world. So our clients are typically education companies that make things for schools. Whether it's curriculum, software, or all the way up to school trips and playground equipment and MISs and all sorts of ed tech and educational curriculum product is our speciality, and there's not many of us in the market, so it's a delight to work in this sector. I started essentially actually, it was by accident. To be honest, I never had an ambition even to work in marketing or even technology. I was always the last person on campus at university to care about the computer room, back in the 90s. But I ended up coming out of university with an English literature degree, not sure what to do, and just went into customer service with a company called Heinemann Publishers at the time, a big school publishing company. I was just interviewing for a job. I was working in Virgin Record Store before that, part time, didn't know what to do, got into customer service, talking to teachers on the phone, answering their, on the end of the phone in a call center. And that was just when the publishers were starting to get into technology in a big way. You had BBC Acorns and those kind of computers in schools. It was really it was low level stuff, but everyone could see it was the way it was going.
Yeah.
And they started to put CD-ROMs in these little plastic sleeves in the back of maths books. And of course, that opened up a whole new problem, which was they hardly worked half the time. And teachers really did not know what they were doing half the time either. So they would ring in and I would answer the call. And people noticed that I just seemed to answer those calls better than perhaps the other people in the room. So they promoted me to ICT manager, team of one. Your job, Chris, to take all of the phone calls from across the UK for teachers that cannot install the software that we're serving them. And it was brilliant, and it obviously just grew from there. So I kind of got in at the right time when the wave of e-learning and online was coming through. Prior to social media to a degree. Um, and that just built up and built up. And eventually I got into edtech startups and product development and online and all that kind of stuff. And that led through to running companies in the edtech space, particularly around curriculum, which is where I love to be, primary, secondary phase. And then ultimately to today, 2026, helping lots of companies promote their product, to teachers and to schools. So yeah, it's been a journey. Lots of mistakes made on the way, but that's what makes us stronger, right, Nick?
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely adore working in this industry, and I wouldn't swap it for anything else. I was talking to a consultant the other day, and almost telling the same story about why aren't you in fintech, or why don't you shift around sectors? And I think it's because the work that we do and the work that our clients do is important. And if they can get their product in front of teachers and it works, it supports, children's education. And in my opinion, there's nothing more important than creating a space for children to learn effectively and enjoy their schooling, and teachers to enjoy the work that they do. Now, I know that's a kind of it's a dream scenario, and we'll probably come on to why education isn't quite the easy market people might think it is.
Yeah.
But I love a challenge.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, education, we've been, I've been in education now for well over 25 years,
Mm,
and you're right. It always sounds a bit corny, but you feel like you're making a difference. Even if you are supporting a company that is doing, some amazing things, supporting, vulnerable children, or it could be send children, or it could be whatever it might be. Everybody is doing it in the main, I think, for the right reasons. And I think that's something that we should all hold dearly, because it's really important, like you say, for the future of those children, as much as what's happening now as well. So yeah, I'm with
yeah.
you.
It really is. And I think that understanding how important that work is a blessing and a curse. Honestly, though, I think in the sense that a lot of education companies have started with that in mind, as in they've been in the classroom, perhaps they're teachers, they're ex-teachers, educators who have moved over to product and online or service or CPD or whatever it might be. And they go in thinking, I have this wonderful idea that solves this specific problem. But of course, that doesn't make them necessarily business people. It doesn't make them necessarily company owners. It doesn't necessarily make them marketers, and certainly doesn't make them salespeople. So you have this kind of tension between, the desire to support and help, and solve a specific problem, and then how do we actually how do we make money off that? How do we
Yeah.
not go bust in the first year? How do we create an onboarding experience that works? How do we create marketing that
Mm.
teachers will listen to and care about? And that's really tough, which is, that's why Be Digital exists. It's why we're here to help those companies discover their voice, create their sales and marketing messages that teachers want to hear. Because teachers are not the easiest audience to market to by a long stretch.
Yeah, I think sort of carry on with that sort of theme really. I think the thing is and I've talked to with a number of different people, and I think in education, it's like all markets, trust is fundamental. But I think in
Absolutely.
education, I think the level of trust you have to get to, I think is a little bit more it's higher. It's
It
because the fact
is.
is trust, in the sense of, because it is the clashing of commercial with, with education. And I think that level of trust you have to get to. If you can get to that point and you can get to the
Right.
additional bit of trust, I think, the world is your oyster as a business. But I think you have to get there first.
You do have to get there, and I think something that potentially investors and non-sector people get wrong is the length of time it takes to gain that
Yeah.
trust. This is not an overnight market. It's not a quick in and out, make your company, sell it on kind of vibe at all. And I think that it's possibly the worst it's ever been, if I can be honest, in terms of gaining that trust. And I think, wider societal challenges are the problem to a degree. Education is still essentially the transference of knowledge from one thing to another, right? And that experience of gaining knowledge and being tested on that knowledge is what schools are all about. Have you learned anything? How do we know that?
Mm,
But the idea that, because we're also dealing with an environment, well, there's two things really that always occurred to me. One is it's one of the only sectors in life in the world where almost 99% of people have been through themselves,
mm,
right? Everyone's been a child, everyone's been, most people have been through some kind of schooling. Um, Everybody's been through some kind of knowledge transfer in their life, whether they're learning skills, practical or theoretical or whatever, or curriculum based. So everyone feels like they've been through school, right? Everyone's been through education. How, they all have an internal knowledge of school, but obviously everyone's experience of school is very different. Every school is very different. Every upbringing is obviously different from each other. So you have this kind of body of people who think they know, and they don't usually. And the second thing is this has been around for a long time. Schooling has been around since humans could, start a fire and pass on songs and knowledge and stories to each other. And thousands and thousands of years later, here we are. So this is not an environment that is new. It's a sector that is slow to change in some regards. It's a sector that is cautious. It's a sector that's risk averse, because it's important. You don't want to get it wrong. You buy something, it doesn't work, you've wasted time, you've wasted public money, you've wasted your students' time, you've perhaps created friction where they didn't need, it's really important that teachers buy the right things for their schools.
mm.
And part of our job is to help the right products get in front of the right people at the right time. That's all sales is, right? And understanding that long tail history of education and understanding and being empathetic to that buying environment, I think are two huge pillars of success in this market, if I'm being honest. So yes, gaining that trust is hard. It takes time. and it takes a lot of effort. And many of the clients that we speak to are struggling with that exact thing. How do we gain, trust within an education environment? We thought we knew, turns out it's a lot harder than we thought. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I always find the market interesting in the sense of, you are right. It's risk. It is reasonably risk averse, and you're right. It has to be because it's sensitive data for starters. There's also an element of, um, is the solutions that are being sold in, are they effectively going to support the majority of the children? Because money is also, as we all know, is not really, there's no additional money going in real terms. I know there's a 3% increase, but basically it's about fundamentally it doesn't really go up, especially with inflation.
No,
So,
no.
and majority of the money is spent on staff. So, but at the same time, I do think education is innovative in the sense of the teachers are innovative. I think they have a really strong, the challenges they must come across, well, they do come across, and then have to identify new ideas of, bringing that child, back into so that, that even if it's just a case of wanting to be educated, and let alone, will they meet them, their full potential, is sometimes, it's difficult and they have to be innovative to find those. So I think there's innovation, but you're right. I think the risk averseness, and which means the cycle becomes slower sometimes to adopt new technologies, I think is definitely a challenge for businesses.
You're absolutely spot on, and I think that it's not that teachers don't want to try new things, but
Mm,
teachers are ultimately learners at heart. I've always felt they're
mm,
excited by the idea of new. They're excited by the idea of trying different pedagogies. They're excited by the idea of learning how to be better teachers. Most teachers are in the profession because they want to work with children. They want to
yeah,
help children. They want to educate children. Right? There really isn't a lot of else. There's not a lot else to it at a fundamental level than they choose to do this because it's a hard career, right?
really.
It spits people out if they can't handle it. And I'll come to that later perhaps. But I think that there is this idea that your customer is there, for, an altruistic reason to a degree. They kind of opted out of the commercial rat race and gone into the public sector. So, you mentioned budget there. That's extremely, extremely important these days. It's not that schools have less money, their per pupil spend is the same. They've got money. This year's the same as they had last year. Yes, you're right. There's a kind of an incremental increase, which doesn't go very far. The bulk is, as you said, spent on staff. So, but that doesn't mean schools don't have money. They do have money. It's
Yeah,
just the choices they're making on how to spend that money is under significant scrutiny, right? So if they're looking at a new MIS, or if they're looking at a new curriculum software package, or they're looking at restocking the library, or they're looking at fixing the roof, or they're trying to find money for the rack repairs that they need to do, or they're trying to find money to hire a school improvement person to come in and support them with key stage 2 maths because results are down on last year and the year before, and that's £400 a day. And support staff need to come in because staff are going off with, stress, so you got to imagine if you're sitting down and thinking about your budget and you'll go, look, on top of all that, energy costs have gone up. Yes, cost of living's gone up for everything. Our parents are more stressed. What we would like to do is one thing, what we have to do is another thing. So if you're asking a school to spend £1,000 a year on your thing, then that £1,000 a year could be going towards keeping the TA in a classroom, right? Or making them redundant. So a school is choosing between, do we keep a member of staff or do we buy your £1,500 a year subscription package? So
yeah,
if we're going to choose the subscription package, it better be damn good,
yeah,
right? We better understand it. The customer support better be great. The pricing needs to be great. The flexibility needs to be great. You need to get us, or we're just going to go, no, no, not now, not this time, and you get brushed away. So that kind of risk assessment that's happening within the schools market is happening all the time. And like I said, it's not because there's less money. It's because the choices they have to make are far harder now and probably going forward than they've ever been in the past. So of course, if someone is feeling it's always a risk for what I buy for the school, but now that's 10x, right? And I need to justify that to the SLT. I need to find a budget. I need to potentially get rid of one thing to get your thing. So when it comes to marketing, how do you tell a story that helps a teacher understand that choosing you is the right decision and works with their budget? So yeah, budget is extremely important, but I don't think it's just pounds and pence. I think it's about value and describing that value and helping teachers understand the value, I think is the biggest thing for marketing going forward in this market, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. It's interesting because you sort of touched on it as well in the sense of that they need to get to that value quickly. There's lots of companies out there that have lots of features, or lots of they might have AI tagged on their product,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Hmm.
Lots of them do, and there's loads of nice words and loads of nice screens. But
Hmm.
actually, the whole purpose of buying a product is the value, is to get the value. And
Right.
actually, in lots of cases, there are times when getting from A, which is installation, to B, value,
Hmm.
actually is not it's not quick. So you know, um, there's a lot of basic pain to go through before you get to the value, which I think a lot of schools don't have time, so they
No.
turn off, so they switch off quite quickly when they get to the point where the value is. They're just there's just too much going on in the school to basically spend lots of time learning a product.
There is. And I think, companies that sell to schools have to be very cognizant of that
Mm,
problem that we talk about teacher time a lot in marketing and sales in this sector. And it's a big topic. I think it's a nuanced topic. If you think about a head teacher, everyone comes to us at the agency, new client, and says, just put me in front of a head teacher and I'll sell. That's all you need to do. Just get me a seat in front of a head teacher. Boom, I'll close that deal, right? And we always have to disabuse them of that fairly quickly. Now, that doesn't necessarily come from your kind of dyed in the wool experienced ed tech people. It comes from all your kind of startups and scale ups where, they're just like, look, get me in front of a head teacher and I'll close the deal. And, we have to kind of reel them in a little bit and say, okay, you're a head teacher and you're getting what on average 70 to 110 emails a day or something, right? From Ofsted, policy changes, parents, blah, 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 and on top of that, a huge swathe of cold emails and marketing outreach,
mm,
nurture series, free trial logins. Like it's an intolerable kind of tsunami of inbox activity. That's just one aspect of why that head teacher will A, struggle to remember who you are,
mm,
and B, have the time to sit and think about what you can do for them, right? So this idea that you're absolutely spot on to say that your customer, your potential customer, has the space and time for like a 45-minute demo. Like you better be damn good to get that 45 minutes out of that senior leader's day or that classroom teacher's day, because they may only be getting 20 minutes for lunch, let alone three-quarters of an hour to sit with you.
yeah,
So the challenge is, how do you build a trust environment, a value first environment where that head teacher does say, yes, actually, I understand your story. I understand the value you might bring. You do meet the needs of my school improvement plan. Maybe I will give you the space to come talk to me about that. But if you're trying to quick win, if you're trying to just blast, if you're trying to just, you know, as your man, your product man, right? So if you're sitting there thinking about features, and as you said, oh, we're powered by AI now, we've added this new thing and this new thing and this new thing, and teachers are just like, look, I haven't got the energy, the time, the space to think about that. And I worry that products move away from their value too quickly by adding new benefits and new features without really thinking about what's the one thing we're doing that teachers value about our products and value about who we are as a support organization. And it's common in any product that they start off with a core problem solving,
yeah,
value, and then 3 years down the line, they're like 50 different product solving things, and you'll go, okay, how do teachers even know what to do with you now? So it's a consistent issue around messaging, value proposition, product design, and something that we're constantly talking to our clients about. Who are you speaking to and how you're translating that value for them.
yeah, man. I think we've sort of talked a lot about the I suppose that the areas, the pain points, the areas of as a business, you got to get around all this. Everything from how you're going to get the trust to how you're going to get your message above everybody else's. So you're right, with all the messages going on, how are you going to get your voice above everybody else's? Which is obviously what Be Digital are about. But
Hmm.
if I was, I'm this year, I'm going to now do my business plan. I'm going to go, right, I'm actually going to
Right,
focus on marketing properly. What would you do at this point in time, without just picking up the phone to you, by the way? But,
right,
what would you do at this point in time for 26, 27 year and go, right,
right.
this is how I'm going to be prepared. These are the things I'm going to do this year. Because I think sometimes people look at marketing and go, well, when something happens, then I'll do some marketing here, or I might do some marketing there. I
Mm.
sometimes wonder if it's planned well enough.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question. I think that many people are quite happy, well, not happy, but they're comfortable with the tactics, right? They're
Mm.
comfortable with the channels. They're less comfortable with the strategy. I find it all the time is they come to us and they say, well, we've tried Facebook, we tried Instagram, we tried YouTube, we've done some webinars, yeah, we've been to bet, and none of it seems to be working, right? Sales are still a bit flat, we don't seem to be gaining the visibility that we think we deserve, that our product should get. And of course, we say, well, that's because you're kind of scattergunning your marketing. You think marketing, you think marketing is Facebook posts. You think marketing is writing on your blog. You think marketing is having a stand at an event. It's not, right? They're all just tactics, right? So strategy is what you want to do, and tactics is how you're going to do it. So everyone does the how, and they really don't focus enough on the what. So at the very top level is, can we sit back and take some space around your strategic goals? Because there's a strong chance that yes, you may have what you might call business values or whatever, but that's not what we're really talking about. Like, how can we make sure that your strategic goals, the what you're going to do, is something that everyone on your team understands and all of your marketing points towards, right?
Mm.
So if we know that marketing in terms of visibility is no longer a problem, right, Nick? So anyone can grab their phone camera and do 3 videos a day for TikTok, right? Anyone can do that now and put you in an audience in front of thousands of people, no worries. So content creation is available, is being democratized. So
Yeah.
anyone can do this. And I think that could be a strategic thing to do, is we're going to be everywhere all the time, right? But I think there's a word to be put in front of that, which is we need to be trusted everywhere all the time. And that means in where you kind of appear. So I think building trust before the buying moment, or even before the buying moment discussion is had, is incredibly important. And a lot of ed tech companies go, come to my website, take out a free trial, and then, A equals B equals C equals a free, equals a buy. And we know that doesn't work at the agency. We've seen it a million times. I've seen it through my career. I've tried it and been disappointed with the results. And I'm like, well, why are you taking out a free trial if you don't want to buy the product? Because essentially the marketing was relying on luck, right? And maybe 1% of those people will buy my product. Therefore, the customer acquisition cost is absolutely fine. But it's really, with schools specifically, it's about building that trust. It's about making content that is about empathy and about understanding the challenges they're up. So it's about showing up consistently. It's about being known in the right circles and making sure your voice is heard. It's about creating content that helps people do their job, right?
Yeah.
Not just understand your product. I think that's quite important. We do a newsletter at Be Digital called TATE, which is an acronym for Turn Attention into Trust, right? And we think that's fundamental in our industry. And we decided straight away if we were going to do it. It actually came out of lockdown. Yes, so Brian, our CEO, would send us things he was thinking about, ideas he had, riffing on, oh, I've got this great book I read, and then we'd send it to the team, right? And we're like, well, this is great. Let's turn this into a newsletter for edtech marketers and staff.
Mm.
So we created this newsletter, which is about deciding that we weren't going to speak about us. That's the fundamental beautiful thing about the Take newsletter, is it's all about sharing tactics, ideas, strategies move, anything from like apps we love, technology we think is great, and none of it, a lot of it may not be nothing to do with education. It could be like we saw this wonderful advert from Toyota, and we think it has these incredible values to it, and we think we just want to share it. It's just like, look, these are great things we want to share, and it's not about marketing. It's not, well, it's about marketing, in its essence, but it's not about being
Everything's
digital.
marketing.
It's yeah, it's essentially a marketing newsletter that's not about marketing. It's about solving problems. It's about raising awareness of quality marketing. It's about helping people that get the newsletter, and it gets like a 60-70% open rate, right? So people value it. It's not about the clicks. It's not even about driving people to our website. It's about being present on a regular 2 weekly basis. And we get lots of feedback. In fact, almost every single one of our clients started off as a newsletter subscriber. So the payback on that, but we spend days of work building this newsletter because we think, well, we love to do it, because marketers are talkers at the end of the day. We love to share ideas. We love to share our strategies. So that's really important. So I think understanding that visibility is easy to get, but building that trust is difficult. So that's part of it, I think. Another thing which I would speak to clients about is, there's this sort of a major challenge that I see with edtech companies is that you say, who do you market to? They'll say, I market to schools, right? And our pushback is, well, you're not selling to a school, right? You're selling to a system of people, a group of people, all with competing priorities, right? So I know this is that kind of, the sale where you're kind of looking at the whole piece, but this isn't like, the CFO, the CEO, and, the CMO. This is everyone from a parent in the playground through to the head of an academy trust, right? And it could involve the janitor, or it could involve the send coordinator, and it could involve the deputy head, and all of them have got competing priorities and different interpretations of the value your product brings. So if your marketing strategy doesn't help those multiple stakeholders reach a consensus, you're going to lose your deals are going to stall, and you're going to think, why, right? So, it comes back to that free trials. The amount that are abandoned is forever a problem in our industry. So free trials, Zoom demos, content and messaging, it needs to work for the different constituencies, leaders, finance people, the practitioners, not just a single champion. You can't say, well, come back to that, put me in front of a head teacher and I'll sell a product. No, actually, because the head teacher is much more likely to delegate the research and the evaluation of a product to people, in the teams that they look after. So it's great to have that single voice champion in the school, 100%. But if you're thinking about how I describe my product to the market, you need to think, well, at some point, the bursar or the business manager is going to be asked to give their opinion, to be involved in that sales process. So how are you speaking the language of the school business manager when you're trying to sell your Key Stage 2 maths product? Right? And that might be about procurement, discount, invoicing, customer support, technical integrations. Your network manager might want his or her voice in the conversation. Well, it doesn't work with our system and it doesn't connect, right? And the send coordinator might be thinking, well, how does this work? Because we have to, send is a huge focus right now, and rightly so. How does this work with our send children, right? Is it easy to use? Is it easy to grasp? What's the training? What's the onboarding process? So I think that thinking we sell to schools is interesting, but it's not the real story. So I think thinking about those multiple stakeholders is important. I think, I guess the final piece would be about being authentic in how you are, right? So I think education marketing has always had a problem, which is there's this professional versus casual, right? And there's this fear that if we don't act in a sort of professional, anonymous, slick kind of way, then we will come across as amateur or something. There's a problem in the sense of, even though look, I think there's no markets more human than education and healthcare, right, Nick? They fundamentally are crazy, chaotic, wonderful, diverse places, where every day is kind of different to the next day. It's just one of those environments, right? So if an education brand knows exactly what problem they solve, and they can tell that story in such a way that resonates with teachers without adding burden, they will carry much more weight in the discussion when those decisions are made. So, in terms of how you strategically approach that, live sessions is interesting, yes. Smaller events, I think that's not a bad shout. Building an audience where people can engage with you directly, having that direct connection to what schools are looking at, how they're deciding to to integrate your product into their systems, deciding who's going to own that product in a school. This is, again, it always comes back to trust. It always comes back to empathy. So I would like to advise clients to, so I'll give you an example. There's a product called Imp Software. They're a finance tool. I don't know if you've come across them. There's loads of finance tools for schools, right? Loads of them. MIS do, all sorts of finance systems. And it's very difficult to stand out when you're dealing with finance, which, for most people is intrinsically not the sexiest thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, how do you describe a bunch of features which are probably quite similar to the bunch of features that 5 of your competitors are also making, right? How do you tell that story in a way that makes you seem different? Because marketing is all about standing out, right? How do you stand out? And Imp Software, I talked to the CMO about this, and theirs is just finance without the faff, right? I was like, brilliant. There's not enough of that in marketing in schools, in the sense of what they've done is through their research and talking to customers and having empathy with their customers, is they realize that one of the biggest burdens that the finance teams and the bursars and the business managers in schools have is the complexity and the administrative burden of managing that piece of work. So they focus right in on saying that it's finance without all of the chaos and mess and faff. And I love that. I love that, I'm not saying it's perfect. I don't know if it's affected sales, but they seem to be doing very well. It's just about saying we know who we are and we know what problem we solve, and we're going to tell that story in such a way that teachers will go, I get it. I get that piece. I'm through the door. Now sell me the rest. And I think that helping products find their voice, because most of them sound pretty similar to each other. You've probably seen this, Nick, in your work. It's hard to differentiate like a finance product where all the features are broadly similar to other features. Your price is broadly similar to everyone else's price. Your branding is fairly similar to everyone else's branding. It's nice. It's kind of blues and whites, and and if you're a teacher and you're busy, and like we talked about earlier, you have a lot of cognitive load. How do you remember the one? How do you stick out in that teacher's mind? So I think those 3 things are really about that shift, 2026, 2027. I think it's always been true, if I'm being honest. But with the rise of social media and this content creation and teachers being probably busier now than they've ever been, I think these are more important than they've ever been, if I'm being honest.
No, I'm absolutely with you. I'm going to come back to authenticative piece, because I think there's a question there which I'd love to get your opinion on.
Sure.
But I agree. I think, just as quickly sort of summarize, basically, that piece that's, it feels like it's free, but actually what you're doing is showing the market, and again, it comes back to trust, as you say, about how you understand their problems, you empathize with them, because basically what you're doing is saying, here's some marketing on it. It could, like you say, it could be a blog, it could be anything, which is basically saying, I understand your pain, and even though I'm not selling the business, I'm not telling you this is how we're going to do it. This is why. It's all about the why of, why you should be considering this. Have a look at some of these, really good resources that other people have created. It could be anything, but basically it's a real strong empathy for the market and for the people you're working with. I think I'm with you. I think it's an amazing piece, which lots of people miss because they're always focused on their own business and how you're going to get that next sale.
That's right. Absolutely. They're busy. They're on it. They're inside the business. We often talk strategically about the curse of knowledge, where you can't unknow what you know. And of course, as a business owner, as somebody who works within a company, you have the politics, the silos, the product development, all the meeting, everything's in here, and you can't unforget that stuff. So when it comes to taking a step back and looking at your product independently, it's really difficult, really difficult. That's why we exist, because we're not in the wheelhouse. We're not inside that team, that product. So we can step back and take an overview of it and help people, hopefully, come to an independent decision about who they are. And I think a lot of people think they know who they are, but that's not often what teachers want to hear. So
or or
we
even perception. So
exactly right.
that's always interesting. I think people's perception is always, and
Yeah.
that's why using companies like sales and stuff are great for that sort of sounding board to go. Actually, is this what people really? We think we portray this. What do you think we portray? And you go, well, actually,
Yeah. You know that feeling when, okay, this is going to sound really weird, but apparently when you look in a mirror, you look at yourself differently than how you know
yeah,
when you look at a photograph and you go, oh, I look awful. You look in the mirror and you kind of see something different, right? So you often say, I don't want to hear my voice. I sound weird when I hear myself, but in my own ears I sound okay. But when I hear myself on audio, I think, oh my God, you sound so odd. It's the same with mirrors and photographs. Like this perception of who you are that how you see yourself is often very different how other people interpret you. So,
yeah,
and I think it's the same with products, is you come up with this ideal. We had a client who was a very technology focused client, and their website was all tech, data and APIs and integrations and hosting. And it was impressive stuff. But of course, the problem is there's very few teachers that care about that stuff really. So we had to say, look, your product has incredible value, but it's not this stuff. That stuff is supportive, and I think
yeah,
it's important, but it's not really what your customers value. Let's be real. They're looking for outcomes for their children. They're looking for improvement. For their school, and that's what we need to talk about. So, yeah, what you think about yourself and how other people interpret you is always something that's very hard to do when you're inside the team, you're inside the product. That's why you come to people like me and say, can you just tell me, like, what am I missing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I totally agree. And I'm going to combine the next two in the sense of so the targeting, again, it's very. I agree with you. I think a lot of people miss it where the janitor, as you say, the caretaker. There's a company called I'm Compliant, really, really
Hmm.
brilliant product.
Hmm.
But they speak the language of the caretaker and stuff
Right.
initially because they're going to be the influencers on buying one of these products, and
Yeah.
then the buyer you then have a different message with, which is obviously the head, or it could be the bursar, or whoever is
Right.
basically the main holds the purse strings, or it could be the CEO or whoever. But each person has a different need, and so you
Hmm.
have to talk to that need, and explain your solution for that particular need. Rather than sort of go, it does all these things. It's more along the
Yeah.
lines, it's going to do this for you and take away
Right.
that pain. So
100%.
I totally agree. It's the targeting of the messaging is really
Mhm.
really important. Um,
Mhm.
the question I've got though, so a lot of people are starting to use AI.
Right.
How do you feel about using AI for these things, getting this authenticness?
I think this is a really important question and something that I think all of us are struggling with a little bit, right? And I absolutely include myself in that. And I think, well, so there's AI being used in the market by
Yeah,
our clients' customers. There's our clients using AI themselves within their platforms. And then there's obviously marketers and creatives who are using AI as part of the work, right? I was interested. I was listening. Well, I can't remember where it was. It might have been TikTok or something. But have you heard of AI brain fry? Is this something you've come across yet, Nick?
no,
AI brain fry. So Harvard Business Review wrote about it. I think yeah, it's probably only last month. It's something that popped up on my feed. It's essentially this kind of phenomenon. It does what it says on the tin. It's like this acute cognitive exhaustion, right? That comes from AI, mental fog, anxiety around performance. It slows down decision making. It's this kind of intensity, this vigilance required to kind of oversee automation and automated tools, which in some respects sort of creates more workload and reduces it. It kind of makes everyone a manager that their job is around delegating to an AI rather than doing the work, right?
yeah,
So you end up with this kind of pile of semi-complete projects and threads and ideas that leaves people feeling overwhelmed and unable to make sense over it. So you get this overstimulation, this over-choice, right? So, I mean, do you remember the first time you used ChatGPT or whatever, right? Like, where were you when you first used ChatGPT? Sat at your laptop, right? Someone went, "Oh, try this." You heard it. Yeah, I'll give that a go. Quick free account, right? The magic moment was when it came back with something coherent incredibly quickly,
Mm.
That for me was like, oh my God, this is a game-changing technology. It's that speed of response for something that feels at least adequate, and if not quite impressive. So that kind of, those few seconds between this didn't exist and now suddenly, oh my God, this exists. This feels like something that I was promised in the movies, right?
Yeah.
Now, fast forward a couple of years. The concern potentially that I have, and certainly, as someone with a creative mindset or strategic mindset, is the work that has to be done to achieve the output, right, is a different sort of work. I'm not saying it's bad, but the work that the kind of the hard work the graft that you would have had to have done is now not really there. In the same way, you can hire a gardener to do your garden, but I prefer to get my hands in the dirt and plant and weed and yeah, I like that because then I can stand back and say, look what I did, right?
Yeah.
And I think that even something like copywriting is I think writing is an incredibly important virtue of a marketer, right? We like to have everyone on our team write copy as much as possible because it's a discipline. It sharpens the mind. It's fun. I love it, and coming up, the copy you might write might be terrible to start with, but over time you come up with something that feels right for the client, right for you. I think that AI makes bad writers adequate and makes good writers bad, right? And I think that the idea that, I mean, look, if you're using AI to solve thorny cancer research problems, I say go for it, right? Let the machines do the thing that helps you, for example, crunch large data sets. Like I use it for that, you use it for that, I'm sure, that kind of thing. But if you start using it for the work around creativity, I think it's challenging. I think that that's my personal, like I use it, we use it daily, but I am very aware now of how it's changing me
Yeah.
as a worker, as a creative, as a strategist, as a marketer. And I want to kind of, I don't know, part of me feels that it does create a certain sense of laziness. It does create the ability, as I said earlier, to just smash out content left, right, and center without really. We've all gone on LinkedIn and seen the same post 50 times, and it can go, it can get a little boring. And there's the cardinal sin in marketing is being boring, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I think that if you look at the other side of the fence, which is within the schools themselves, it's absolutely thriving in, well, I say thriving. It's being adopted in schools. I think I saw somewhere that three-quarters of teachers are using AI on a daily basis now, in some way or another, creating lesson plans or popping up an image of Mount Everest to teach about mountain ranges or whatever. And like I get that, and that kind of makes sense. And then you've got the kind of data intelligence layers that a lot of companies are introducing now for schools, where they're interpreting these huge data sets and all the rest of it, and that feels good too. That feels like a great use of AI. But within the education system as it is, where learning a curriculum ends with a test to prove you learned something, right? That's people have called it the factory approach, the sausage machine, whatever you want to call it. That is kind of roughly how schools kind of are, even if we'd like to think they're not. Then the natural response to AI in a student's experience is, what's the point in learning anything when every answer is available at the typing of a prompt, right? And my daughter's doing A levels, and she uses ChatGPT to kind of organize her thoughts. And I
Yeah.
get that, but I would be very unimpressed if she spat out an essay using ChatGPT. So would her teachers, and she'd be rightly held up. But when it's so quick and so easy and so tempting, like how do you stop people, right? Because ultimately, we love the convenience, right? We can look smart, we can look clever, we can look impressive, but actually, it's not us looking smart, clever, or impressive, right? And that for me is a huge concern. So I think there's kind of a few things about it. I think from our perspective as a marketer, I think it's great for using it to think better, but not create better, right? Because the end goal of that is everything starts to feel the same, and you end up with the same problem, which is nobody cares. So pressure testing ideas, analyzing customer insights, exploring angles. It's kind of less, write me this, but help me work this out. And I think that strategically is really important. So, for example, we were helping a new client the other day think about their messaging. And I said, look, give me all of the customer testimonials, all the reviews of Amazon, or, bring them to me in a big spreadsheet. And I used an LLM to interpret and pick out the themes and the keyword, key language, and that kind of thing, and then use that as a basis to then think, right, so now I know what the customers are thinking. I'll use that to help drive the language, right, and the value proposition, and it worked brilliantly because suddenly you're not trying to guess what the customer wants to hear. You're literally using the words the customers are using themselves. And
Yeah.
it's the skill of a marketer to understand why that's important. But the AI helped me do the admin work, which was just identify what's important, and I will do the rest, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. The second thing is around you've probably heard of GEO, generative search, or all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a big traffic driver yet. If you go to any website, most of it's still coming from normal search and brand searching, stuff like that. But it's only going to get bigger. But it's not something I think yet to optimize for. Although there's a lot of influencers out there trying to get you to change your website and do this and do that to appear on more some more LLM recommendations, and that's fine. I think that's a separate topic that's quite more technical. But zero-click searching, have you heard of zero click? You heard of the term zero click searching?
Zero click. No.
Zero click. So basically, you experience it every day, right? It's when Google search shows an AI overview before it gives you
Yeah.
any links, right? We see it every day now. It's just part of our lives, right? So any information or knowledge type searching is now answered by the engine itself without ever sending any traffic to your website, right? So you start to think, well, what content are we making then? If AI is just going to give my potential leads the answer straight off the bat, what am I writing about? Why do I bother doing a blog? Why do I bother,
Yeah.
those things are still important. So the question for clients would be, how do we compete for search? Do we invest in answers, content, influence? You're doing this podcast, right? This interview thing, right? Your fireside chats. So you know what I'm talking about when I say that making native content, I think, is going to be strategically very important going forward. So you
Yeah.
create content that doesn't require a click to experience it. I think that's going to be far better for reach and engagement than optimizing, for the informational kind of searching, like how do I do X or why would I do Y, or recommend me the top three, such and such.
Yeah.
So I think that ultimately SEO will die off because Google won't show your site in any meaningful way, right? So content creation, you've got to rethink that. Why would we write stuff that no one ever sees? And inbound links, platforms where most of the energy of the web is happening, they don't want to send traffic to you. They want to keep them on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. Like, they don't want you to go away. So
Yeah.
I think it's more important than ever to own and connect to your audience, right? So your email list, your newsletters, your native content, your thought leadership, your private networking groups, your social media. I think that's something that every edtech brand and every company that sells to schools should be thinking about investing in things that they can own rather than trying desperately to figure out how to get people like Google to link, to get them number one on search. So I think it's about being human.
Yeah.
I think it's making marketing that's hard to ignore, not easy to ignore. I think AI is making us all kind of crave that interaction a bit more, Nick. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think societally, I think we're all feeling that AI pressure. I mean, if you've probably heard of third spaces, right? Where they're almost disappearing from our towns and our communities, and it's incredibly
Yeah.
sad, right? You got work and you got home, but that third space, your pubs, your clubs, your youth clubs, all that, it's just kind of gone. Well, it's not gone, but you know what I mean? Like before,
Going.
he's going, and it breaks my heart, and the high streets are turning into Costas and Boots and mountain warehouses and what have you, and it's fine, but it does mean that we are a little bit abandoned, a little bit lonely. So therefore, perspective, experience, insight is what will make you distinct as a brand, make you distinct as a company, because you know your value and you speak in a way which is a direct link to your audience and not a direct link to some, algorithm that you think will help you. So I think AI ultimately helps us get faster. It helps us sharpen up ideas. But when everyone can do everything, right, the only thing that stands out is you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to understand. So yeah, AI is a big part of the work going forward, but I think it's a much more nuanced discussion. around how that works with us as people and how we translate that into our work. I mean, I'm sure you have the same thing, right, Nick? You probably use AI yourself in various areas, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, absolutely brilliant. I totally and utterly agree. I absolutely love it. You're right. I think there's so examples are you sometimes put out and I'm sure you guys have found it as well. You put out a post or do something where it's informative, and then somebody has just put it through ChatGPT and said, "Can you do the same but just make it a bit different?" And you just go, "That's the post we put out,
That's right.
but
That's right.
slightly worded,
It's
slightly
almost
different."
insulting, isn't it? And
Well, I don't know. You know what they say. Was it what when people copy your stuff, then it's supposed to
right,
be
imitation is the sincerest form of
that's it.
flattery. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
not so
fine if
sure.
you're doing it, but if you're just asking a robot to do it, I don't know if that's flattery or that's just, I don't know what that is. We need some new language, some new vernacular to help us
I
describe
agree,
those feelings.
but also I think you have to put. It's interesting because people sort of go, "AI is brilliant. It saves you loads of time." I think initially it doesn't, because actually the best you get the best out of AI when you put a lot of effort into the prompts. So making sure that it understands that you are acting as a particular type, or it could be a caretaker, but you then have to put a lot of effort into explaining what that might be, and then
Mhm.
you need to explain exactly what you want to try and get. So the next time you do save a bit of time because you don't have to put so much effort in, because you can sort of go, right, this is the person now. But I don't think AI initially is something where people should just look at and go, oh, that would just I'd put up a quick post by using it. I think you have to put a lot of effort in to get a good post from it. And I think the other point I would make, which I think is really interesting, I don't know if you tried this, but have you asked AI to act as somebody, as a person? It's really interesting. So
As
I
as a,
asked,
as a, as a, as a like a famous person or as
yeah,
like an
Steve
expert.
Jobs or
Oh,
something like
okay. Oh no, I've not done that. That feels weird.
that. I agree. But you can get a panel. So you can go act as Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and argue with each other.
Oh wow. No, I've not done that. I will definitely try that. I will definitely try that. But I often before doing any kind of interaction, I will give it like you're an expert in X or whatever, just so it knows like what to do. And I'll certainly use it in my personal life to help me achieve things quicker. Like I was looking to buy a bread maker the other day, and it was like what do I know about bread maker? I just fancied one, right? And I wasn't really interested in going off to curries, and I just wanted to know like how can you help me understand what kind of bread I want, how to make it, what kind of machines are going to be best within my budget? And it was fantastic. It really helped me kind of organize in a very simple way. I still haven't brought the bread maker, but the ambition was nicely corralled using AI, and it was incredibly helpful as like that kind of guide on the side that has all access to all this knowledge. But
Did it come back to you and say you don't want to buy it yet because you won't make any for another couple of weeks? So I've looked at your diary. No.
it's this really fascinating scene. You ever seen Good Will Hunting? With the Matt Damon and what's his name? Oh my God, the famous comedian. Anyway,
Yeah.
Good Will Hunting.
I do know. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robin
This is
Williams.
called Robin Williams, of course. So they're sat on a park bench, and he's just had a fight with him, and looked at a picture on his wall when he's having like a session with him, and talked about his wife who died, and tore apart his life, as he said, just by looking at a painting that I did that expressed all my feelings. He said, and he sat him down. He went, "I'm sure you can tell me." In terms of, have you ever been to the Sistine Chapel, right? No, I haven't. I'm sure you can tell me, Michelangelo's sexual orientation, his techniques. You can tell me about the history of the Vatican. You can tell me all this stuff that comes from books, but you've never been there, so you can't tell me what it smells like. You can't tell me the feeling of holding my wife's hand when she was in her final hours. You cannot know that stuff. And I feel it's a little bit like AI, isn't it? In the sense that AI can only look backwards, it can't look forwards, and it can't experience anything that hasn't been put on the internet, basically. If it's not been turned into ones and zeros, it doesn't know about it. So, when it comes to making bread, it can't tell me if I've got space in my kitchen to actually have a bread maker. It can just tell me the dimensions of a bread maker, right? So it has limitations. And I think we're still very early days, and I think that as humans, we adore the convenience. and we adore the kind of status improvements of having this at our beck and call. I mean, one thing that worries me about it, Nick, is it's very kind of, it agrees with you a lot, and I think there's a problem around that.
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
sense that it doesn't challenge particularly well, or even act like if I was down the pub with a mate exploring a challenge I had in my life versus an LLM AI, you get very different responses, wouldn't you, from someone who's known you for 20 years, and knows everything around you, versus an LM, which can only look at what other people have wrote about the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think the same thing comes to marketing is, as a marketer, you need to go into schools, you need to be a governor, you need to read the research, you need to go talk to teachers, right? And I
absolutely.
say that's all our clients, and they do, to be honest, it's that they're not unaware of that. But like I said a minute ago, using AI to run, look at the data from customer feedback and then using that as a basis for good marketing, I think is a smart way to use AI. That's the kind of thing that I think it's important for.
I agree, and I think the word authentic, as you sort of suggested, I think it's really important here. I think no matter what AI comes up with, go through it and trust yourself, trust
Yeah.
your experience. You've had 25 years experience of
Right.
or whatever it might be of
Yeah.
education, where AI probably has had a couple of years. So making it more authentic and more relevant to your audience, I think is really, 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 really important.
Yeah. I've
Um,
never I've never found an AI to understand the language that the real language that will create that trust and empathy. I have a personal crusade against bad value propositions in edtech marketing. You see it everywhere. Saving teachers time, empowering students, like all this nonsense. It's meaningless, right? And no teacher's going to look at that and go, "Oh my God, I woke up this morning feeling like I wanted to empower my students and save myself time." Like if all these products that claim to save teachers time actually save teachers time, they'd have loads of time, but they don't. They're busier than ever. So something's not connecting. And I think that if you go to an AI, you're going to get saves teachers time. You're going to get empowering teachers, because it doesn't really get it. It's
yeah,
not. We think it's intelligent, but of course it's not intelligent. And you're not going to get that. You're going to get alternate ideas. You're not going to get much creativity. So I think that the more we use it, the more we lean on it as a crutch. And I don't think we should. I think we should have a discipline to understand its limitations. But I guess, we're all in the same boat, right, Nick? We're all learning it at the same time. And I think, yeah, adopting it is the right thing to do, and learning how best to use it is the right thing to do, but not use it to replace the people part of the equation. And that's what teachers will ultimately resonate with is the people behind the brand and the mission and the vision and the values of the company, that the benefits it brings to that school. So
yeah, totally agree. It is looking out to the internet, and as you say, if all the value propositions are saying save money and time,
right.
then it's probably going to give you back what
I
it's
love
deemed
people.
as fines.
Yeah. When was the last time you saved money and time, Nick? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a tricky one.
Chris, I'm really aware of time, so
Sure.
and I appreciate you're a busy man. Can you just give us the three summary points that the key things that your own kit bag that
Yeah.
you would say are really important that everybody needs to, we should be focusing on for, especially for the rest of this year or going into 2027? I appreciate, what do you think is going to be important for, be
Yeah.
digital? Where are you
Yeah,
guys
of
going?
course. Of course. I think, as I said earlier, applying time and effort to the strategy it's not about just laying out a content calendar. It's about pattern spotting. I think it's about knowing where the deals might stall in your pipeline. It's about where your messaging is landing, who it's landing with, what buyers are doing, what they're kind of, thinking about. Looking at the world through your audience's eyes, I think is extremely important. And it's not easy to do because most of the time when you run your work through a CRM, you tend to think of people as objects, as
Yeah,
things, job titles, budget holders, decision makers. Yeah. But you don't tend to think of them as real flawed human beings. And any salesperson in a room with a customer will hopefully, the best ones will listen and they will understand and they will empathize and they will be able to adapt accordingly, right? Teachers are not a monolith. They have all the same worries as the rest of us: status, attention, jealousy, curiosity, anger, delight. They're just like, I mean, of course, it goes without saying, but it actually needs to be said, that, there's a feeling that these feelings don't belong in a B2B sales situation. I think they do. I would argue they're extremely important to building that lasting brand that teachers will want to buy from over time. And the most long-standing edtech companies and education companies get that at their core. You know, they're not trying to be flashy and this kind of stuff. They're saying we listen, we learn, we make mistakes. You know, we're teacher focused, not just we don't try and pretend that we save teachers time. We know it's much more complicated than that, and that's why we so being, you know, staying close to the real conversations, I think, is strategically really important, from sales calls, feedback, customer objections, not just dashboards and CRMs and job titles. I think that's really important. I think empathy is enormously important when building your strategy. So understanding the customer isn't quite enough. I think it's the bulk of it, but you need to understand how decisions get made within the pressure that schools are under, right? Yeah. So in a school, as we talked earlier, that's risk, that's budget, that's workload, that's internal politics. Yes, if you get that, then I think marketing makes those decisions within a school feel safe, not just fancy features and things like that. And I think that there's something around, okay, so for example, that understanding those factors of decision making. So yesterday I read in the TES that there was a survey that found that 90% of teachers have experienced rude or disrespectful behaviour, right? 60%, I think, 60%, I think, have been victims of abuse or verbal threats or whatever. And I think 10% have been physically assaulted, right? And this leads to a huge chunk that want to quit the profession, right? And that's from parental engagement, that's parental interactions with schools, with teachers. So when you think about the people you're selling to, they're in a defensive, risk-aware mindset, right? It's a high stress environment, right? So they're not just looking for what's new or what's fancy or what's flashy. They're looking for what's safe. They're looking for things that won't create more problems. When time and cognitive load are stretched like crazy, you've got rising complaints and behavior issues. You need to make sure that what you sell is quick to grasp, it's low effort to implement, and it's easy to act, or you'll get ignored, right? If emotional fatigue is off the charts, stress tolerance for hype and nonsense is not going to help. So reassurance, credibility, trust, proof from teachers like them are going to resonate. Reputational risk is a problem. If they buy a crappy product, it's going to escalate quickly, especially if you've got parents involved. So there's always this sense of, what if I buy your product and it goes wrong, right? So that idea that if your marketing and sales isn't answering that question, you're going to fail. And then so you have this hugely sensitive environment around send, around behavior, around attendance, around outcomes. Ofsted, you're selling. Yeah, I guess my final thought would be, you're selling into a space that's charged with emotion, right? That's charged with scrutiny, where things going wrong are amplified 10 times. So having that clear point of view, knowing who you are, knowing who your audience is, and building that trust is incredibly important. So I'm thinking kind of less about Facebook ads or YouTube things or doing stuff at Bet or whatever, and more about how we're building a brand that teachers can experience in a way that makes sense for them in this highly charged, highly emotional, highly kind of crazy environment that they're professionally trying to, you can imagine, right? And it's that ability to be empathetic with your customers that I think will underpin all your strategy and all your tactics. So yeah, I think understanding that value and understanding how to build trust through marketing is probably what I would put at front and center of anyone that works in our sector, Nick, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. And a massive thank you for your time, and also for us to be able to suck out information from your brain and so on. And you're not AI, which is obviously very, very beneficial.
I'm not. Well, that you know of. I mean, maybe it's advanced. No, one day. I mean, I hope you never have to speak to an AI. That would be terribly dull. But no, I'm always happy to show up. It's great. It's great. I mean, I'll talk about marketing skills until the cows come home. So it's a pleasure, Nick. And yeah, really great to speak to you.
Yeah, you too, mate. Thanks very much for your time. And
thanks, Ed.
I'll speak to you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.